I walked through the front door of my childhood home, still buzzing with excitement from my last day at the summer marketing internship. College started in 3 weeks, and I could barely contain my anticipation. But as I stepped into the kitchen, I found my parents sitting with my older sister Amanda and her fiancé Derek, surrounded by wedding planning materials scattered across our oak dining table. My mother Jennifer looked nervous, fidgeting with her wedding ring, while my father Robert avoided eye contact completely. Jennifer suddenly blurted out that they had borrowed my college fund for Amanda's dream wedding, all $28,000 of it. "You should be proud," she said. "Sacrificing for family shows real character." I stared at the wedding dress receipt on the table, feeling my future crumble. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen in the doorway, my laptop bag sliding off my shoulder and hitting the hardwood floor with a dull thud. $28,000. Gone. Just like that. Amanda looked up from her bridal magazine, her perfectly manicured fingers still flipping through pages of flower arrangements. She had always been the golden child in our family, the one who seemed to glide through life effortlessly. Homecoming queen in high school, sorority president at State University, and now engaged to Derek Morrison, whose family owned the largest law firm in our county. Everything Amanda touched seemed to turn to gold. While I had always been the practical one, the one who studied harder, worked longer, and planned for the future, I watched my parents struggling to explain their decision, and suddenly everything about our family dynamic became crystal clear. While I had spent the past 4 years maintaining a 4.0 grade point average, working part-time jobs, and earning a full academic scholarship to one of the best business programs in the state, Amanda had been planning the social event of the season. Her engagement to Derek was not just a marriage, it was a merger, a way for our middle-class family to climb the social ladder in our small Tennessee town. Derek sat back in his chair, looking supremely comfortable in his tailored polo shirt and expensive watch. His family had money going back 3 generations, and everyone in town knew it. The Morrisons owned half the commercial real estate downtown, and Derek's father was the kind of lawyer who played golf with judges and city councilmen. When Amanda started dating him 2 years ago, I watched my parents transform into completely different people, suddenly concerned with country club memberships and charity galas they had never cared about before. "Your sister only gets one wedding day," my mother said, her voice taking on that pleading tone she used whenever she wanted me to be reasonable. "You are so intelligent, Victoria. You will figure out another way. You always do." I realized in that moment that being the responsible one, the achiever, the one who never caused problems, had made me expendable in their eyes. Amanda's happiness was immediate and visible, something they could show off to their friends and neighbors. My education was an investment in a future they could not see, could not brag about at dinner parties, could not use to elevate their own status. Robert finally looked at me directly, his face flushed with embarrassment but his jaw set with determination. "We are not asking you to give up college forever," he said. "Just take a gap year, work full-time, save up the money again. The school will still be there next year." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest as I realized they had already made this decision without consulting me. They had spent months planning this conversation, probably rehearsing their justifications, preparing their arguments for why my dreams should be postponed for Amanda's perfect day. But the real blow was yet to come. As I stood there trying to process the magnitude of what they had done, Jennifer pulled out a manila envelope from under the wedding planning materials. Inside were the savings bonds my grandmother had left specifically for my education when she passed away 5 years ago. Bonds worth an additional $8,000 that were meant to be untouchable, held in trust until I turned 21 or started college. "We had to cash these in too," she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "The wedding venue required a larger deposit than we expected." My hands trembled as I looked at the paperwork. They had forged my signature. My own parents had committed fraud to fund my sister's wedding, using money my grandmother had specifically designated for my future. The woman who had taught me to save every penny, who had worked double shifts as a hospital nurse to put aside money for my education, who had made me promise to never let anyone steal my dreams. I looked around the table at my family, at the people who were supposed to support and protect me, and realized that I was completely on my own. I walked upstairs to my bedroom without saying another word. Behind me, I could hear Amanda's voice rising in excitement as she resumed discussing flower arrangements as if my entire future had not just been decided and discarded in a matter of minutes. The sound of her laughter drifted up through the floorboards, mixing with my mother's relieved sighs and Derek's deep chuckles. Sitting on the edge of my twin bed, surrounded by the same pale blue walls I had stared at through countless nights of homework and dreams of college life, I forced myself to think logically. Anger would not solve anything. Tears would not change their decision. The money was gone, already committed to vendors and venues, already spent on Amanda's fairy tale. I pulled out my laptop and began researching emergency financial aid options. Private student loans, work-study programs, payment plans that would allow me to attend school while working multiple jobs. The numbers were daunting, but not impossible. I had 3 weeks to figure out how to fund my first semester, and I was determined to make it work. Over the next 3 days, while my family continued their wedding preparations around me, I methodically planned my escape. I applied for every loan program available to students in my situation. I contacted my high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, who had always believed in my potential. She spent 2 hours on the phone with me, walking through options I had never considered, connecting me with resources for students from families who could not or would not support their education. The hardest part was watching my parents go about their daily routines as if nothing had changed. My father left for work each morning, coffee mug in hand, whistling the same tune he had whistled for years. My mother bustled around the house, making lists and phone calls, coordinating details for a wedding that cost more than most families spent on a car. They seemed genuinely puzzled by my silence, occasionally asking if I was feeling all right, if I needed anything from the store. Amanda tried to bridge the gap between us one evening, knocking on my bedroom door while I filled out loan applications on my laptop. She perched on my desk chair, looking radiant in the way that brides always seem to look, as if happiness was literally glowing from within her. "I know this is hard," she said, playing with the enormous diamond on her finger. "But think about what this means for all of us. Derek's family has connections everywhere. They can help you get internships, maybe even a job after college. This wedding is an investment in our entire family's future." I looked at her sitting there, so confident that her happiness justified my sacrifice, and realized she genuinely believed what she was saying. In her mind, postponing my education for a year was a small price to pay for the social advancement her marriage would bring to our family. She could not understand that my dreams were not negotiable, not something to be bartered away for her benefit. The night before I left, I went through my childhood belongings one final time. Tucked in the bottom drawer of my dresser, I found a small wooden box my grandmother had given me for my 16th birthday. Inside were old family photographs, including one of my grandmother and me from my high school graduation. She was beaming with pride, her arm around my shoulders, and on the back she had written, "For my brilliant granddaughter, who will change the world someday. Education is the one thing no one can ever take away from you." I packed everything I owned into my Honda Civic, a car I had bought with money earned from 2 years of weekend shifts at the local diner. My clothes, my books, my laptop, and that small wooden box with my grandmother's photograph. I left a note on the kitchen counter explaining that I was moving to my college town early to get settled, to find work, to prepare for the academic year ahead. As I loaded the last box into my car in the pre-dawn darkness, I noticed Amanda watching me from her bedroom window. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something flicker across her face. Doubt, maybe, or guilt. But then Derek's car pulled into the driveway, and her attention shifted immediately to her fiancé, to her wedding, to her perfect life that my sacrifice was helping to fund. I drove away without looking back, carrying nothing but determination and the memory of my grandmother's voice telling me that education was the one treasure no one could steal. The roadside inn was not exactly what anyone would call luxury accommodations, $29 a night for a room that smelled faintly of bleach and cigarettes, with a mattress that sagged in the middle and a television that received exactly 4 channels. But it was clean, it was cheap, and it was mine. For the first time in my life, I was completely independent, completely responsible for my own survival. My first stop was the university's financial aid office, where a kind woman named Barbara helped me navigate the emergency loan process. The paperwork was overwhelming, but Barbara walked me through each form, explaining terms and conditions, helping me understand exactly what I was committing to. By the end of the week, I had secured enough funding to cover tuition and basic living expenses for 1 semester, with the understanding that I would need to maintain perfect grades and find substantial employment to continue. The job search led me to Morrison Marketing Solutions, a small but growing agency downtown that specialized in digital campaigns for local businesses. The irony of the name was not lost on me. No relation to Derek's family. Just a coincidence that felt like the universe testing my resolve. Sarah Chen, the owner and creative director, interviewed me in her cluttered office above a coffee shop, surrounded by awards and campaign posters from successful projects. "Tell me why you want to work in marketing," she said, leaning back in her chair and studying my resume. I had prepared for this question, but when I opened my mouth, the truth came spilling out instead of my rehearsed answer. I told her about my family situation, about funding my own education, about needing work that would complement my business studies rather than just pay the bills. Sarah listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding, her expression growing more interested as I spoke. "You know what I like about your story," she said when I finished. "You are not here because daddy's connections got you an internship. You are here because you need to be here, which means you will work harder than anyone else I could hire." She offered me 20 hours a week at $12 an hour, with the possibility of additional project work if I proved myself capable. It was not enough to live comfortably, but combined with my student loans and careful budgeting, it would be enough to survive. My first assignment was managing social media accounts for 3 small businesses: a local bakery, a boutique clothing store, and a family-owned restaurant. Sarah threw me into the deep end immediately, expecting me to learn by doing, to figure out what worked and what did not, through trial and error. I spent my evenings in my tiny dorm room, researching marketing strategies, analyzing successful campaigns, teaching myself skills that were not covered in my textbooks. The work was challenging in the best possible way. I discovered I had an intuitive understanding of what made people respond to online content, a natural ability to create posts that generated engagement and drove sales. Within a month, all 3 of my clients had seen measurable increases in their online traffic and revenue. Sarah began giving me larger accounts, more complex projects, more responsibility than a typical college intern would receive. My academic classes were equally demanding, but in a different way. Business ethics, financial accounting, marketing principles, organizational behavior, subjects I had dreamed about studying for years. I attended every lecture, participated in every discussion, completed every assignment with the intensity of someone who understood exactly how much each credit hour was costing. My professors noticed my dedication, and several offered additional guidance and mentorship that proved invaluable. The financial pressure was constant and exhausting. I walked or rode a borrowed bicycle everywhere to save on gas. I lived on rice, beans, and whatever was on sale at the discount grocery store. I bought used textbooks online and sold them back immediately after final exams. Every dollar was accounted for, every expense carefully considered. But despite the hardships, I felt more alive and purposeful than I had ever felt living in my parents' house. The work at Morrison Marketing Solutions was teaching me skills that perfectly complemented my academic studies. I was building a professional portfolio, developing relationships with local business owners, creating value in the real world while earning my degree. 3 months into the semester, Sarah called me into her office for my first formal performance review. I had been expecting feedback on my work quality, maybe a discussion about scheduling conflicts between my job and my classes. Instead, she handed me a printout of analytics data from all my client accounts. "Look at these numbers," she said, pointing to the growth charts. "Your clients have seen an average revenue increase of 37% since you started managing their accounts. That is not luck, Victoria. That is talent." She offered me a promotion to junior associate, with increased responsibilities and a raise to $15 an hour. More importantly, she began involving me in strategy sessions with potential new clients, teaching me about business development, proposal writing, and client relationship management. During one of our regular family phone calls, my mother asked when I was planning to come home for Thanksgiving. "The wedding is in December," she said, "and Amanda really wants you to be there. She has been asking about you constantly." I listened to her voice, so casual and optimistic, as if the past 3 months had been a minor inconvenience rather than a complete upheaval of my life. I realized they had no idea what I had accomplished, what I was building for myself, how much I was learning and growing. To them, I was just their stubborn daughter who had temporarily moved away but would eventually come to her senses and return home. I am building something important here, I told her. I cannot just drop everything for a wedding that was funded with my future. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds before she responded. You are being very selfish, Victoria. Family should come first. After I hung up, I sat in my small dorm room looking out at the campus where I was thriving, at the life I was creating through my own determination and hard work. For the first time since leaving home, I felt completely certain that I had made the right choice. December arrived with the kind of bitter cold that makes Tennessee winters feel harsher than they actually are. Social media became my unwilling window into Amanda's wedding preparations, as every detail was documented and shared with the enthusiasm of someone who believed the entire world was invested in her happiness. The dress fittings, the flower arrangements, the menu tastings, all funded with money that should have been supporting my education. I made the difficult decision not to attend the wedding, telling my parents I had important final exams that week. The truth was more complicated. I was working extra shifts at Morrison Marketing Solutions to save money for spring semester, but I also could not bear to watch my family celebrate a decision that had derailed my carefully planned future. The thought of sitting in that church, watching $28,000 of my grandmother's hopes and dreams transformed into centerpieces and wedding cake, felt like a betrayal of everything she had worked to give me. Sarah understood my situation without judgment, offering me additional project work during the wedding weekend. We were launching a major campaign for a regional restaurant chain, and the extra income helped ease the constant financial pressure I was under. While my family danced and celebrated, I spent Saturday night in the office, analyzing demographic data and refining our targeting strategy. The wedding photos appeared on social media throughout the weekend, each image more extravagant than the last. Amanda looked radiant in her custom-designed gown, the one that had cost more than most people's cars. The venue was spectacular, the decorations were magazine-worthy, and every guest seemed to be having the time of their lives. Looking at those pictures from my small dorm room, eating microwaved ramen while working on homework, I felt a complex mixture of emotions I struggled to untangle. But 3 weeks later, everything changed. Amanda called me on a Tuesday evening while I was studying for my organizational behavior final exam. Her voice was barely recognizable through the tears and hysteria, words tumbling over each other as she tried to explain what had happened. Derek had been unfaithful throughout their engagement, carrying on affairs with multiple women, including 2 of her former sorority sisters. She had discovered text messages, photos, hotel receipts, evidence of betrayals that went back almost to the beginning of their relationship. The worst part was learning that Derek's family had known about his behavior all along. They had welcomed Amanda into their social circle with smiles and champagne toasts, all while knowing their son was treating her as nothing more than temporary entertainment. His mother had even made comments to friends about how Derek would eventually marry someone from their own social class, someone more suitable for the Morrison family legacy. I listened to my sister sob into the phone, describing how Derek's father had already filed divorce papers, how the prenuptial agreement she had signed would leave her with virtually nothing, how the marriage she had dreamed about her entire life was ending before she had even finished sending thank you cards for the wedding gifts. Our parents were devastated, not just by Amanda's heartbreak, but by the social humiliation of it all. The same neighbors and friends who had congratulated them on securing such an advantageous match for their daughter were now whispering about the spectacle, about how quickly the fairy tale had crumbled, about whether they had been naive to trust the Morrison family's acceptance. I found myself in the strange position of comforting the sister whose dreams had cost me my own, listening to her describe the collapse of everything my sacrifice had been meant to secure. The wedding that had consumed my college fund had lasted exactly 23 days before Derek announced he wanted a divorce. The social advancement my parents had envisioned had turned into public embarrassment. The investment in our family's future had yielded nothing but debt and heartache. During winter break, I returned home to find a house transformed by grief and financial stress. Amanda had moved back into her childhood bedroom, spending most of her time crying or sleeping, refusing to discuss her future or make plans for moving forward. My parents were struggling with bills they had never expected to face, credit card debt from wedding expenses they had assumed Derek's family would help cover, a second mortgage they had taken out to fund the reception venue. The atmosphere was heavy with regret and unspoken accusations. Nobody said directly that they had made a mistake, but the evidence was impossible to ignore. The wedding albums sat unopened on the coffee table, The expensive decorations were stored in boxes in the garage, and Amanda's custom wedding dress hung in her closet like a ghost of dreams that had never been real. Robert attempted one awkward conversation with me during my visit, approaching the subject of my education like a man walking through a minefield. He asked about my classes, my job, my plans for the future, and I could see him struggling with the realization that I was thriving despite their lack of support. When I told him about my promotion at Morrison Marketing Solutions, about my academic achievements, about the opportunities I was creating for myself, his face showed a mixture of pride and shame that was painful to witness. "Your grandmother would be proud of you," he said quietly, and those were the first words from my family that had made me feel valued in over a year. I returned to college with a strange sense of liberation. The wedding was over, the marriage was ended, and I was still standing. I had survived the worst thing my family could do to me, and I had emerged stronger, more independent, and more determined than ever to succeed on my own terms. Spring semester brought new challenges and unexpected opportunities that would transform my understanding of what was possible. My academic performance remained exceptional, earning me recognition on the dean's list and recommendations from professors who saw potential for graduate school and advanced career opportunities. But it was my work at Morrison Marketing Solutions that would prove to be the real game changer. Sarah had been watching my development with increasing interest, assigning me to more complex projects and larger client accounts. My natural ability to understand consumer psychology, combined with the analytical skills I was developing in my business courses, had created a unique expertise in digital marketing strategy that was producing remarkable results for our clients. In March, Sarah called me into her office for what I assumed would be a routine project briefing. Instead, she presented me with the opportunity that would change everything. A national restaurant franchise was looking for a local agency to develop their digital marketing strategy for the southeastern region. The contract was worth $150,000 over 2 years, the largest deal Morrison Marketing Solutions had ever pursued. "I want you to lead this project," Sarah said, sliding a folder across her desk. "You understand their target demographic better than anyone else here, and your campaign concepts have consistently outperformed anything we have done before." I spent the next 2 weeks immersed in research and strategy development, creating a comprehensive marketing plan that addressed every aspect of the franchise's digital presence. I analyzed their current social media performance, identified gaps in their customer engagement strategy, and developed innovative approaches to reaching their target audience. The proposal I created was more than 50 pages of detailed analysis, creative concepts, and measurable objectives. The presentation meeting was held in a conference room at the franchise's regional headquarters, with executives who had been in the marketing industry longer than I had been alive. I was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure, knowing that this single presentation could determine not just the future of Morrison Marketing Solutions, but my own financial security for the next 2 years. I presented my strategy with the confidence of someone who had done their homework thoroughly, answering every question with data and examples, addressing every concern with practical solutions. The franchise executives were impressed not just by the quality of my work, but by my understanding of their business challenges and my innovative approaches to solving them. 2 days later, Sarah received the call that would change both of our lives. Morrison Marketing Solutions had won the contract, and the franchise executives had specifically requested that I remain as the primary strategist for the project. My commission for securing and managing the account would be $30,000, paid over the course of the first year. $30,000. More than my stolen college fund, more than my grandmother's savings bonds, more than I had ever imagined earning as a college student working part-time for a small marketing agency. The news felt surreal as I sat in my small dorm room that evening, looking at the official contract documents and trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. In the span of 8 months, I had gone from having my future stolen by my family to earning more money than they had taken from me. The skills I was developing, the experience I was gaining, and the professional relationships I was building were creating opportunities that would have been impossible if I had remained dependent on their financial support. I made the decision to keep this success private from my family. They were still struggling with the aftermath of Amanda's divorce, still dealing with the financial stress of their poor decisions, still trying to rebuild their social standing in a community that had witnessed their humiliation. The last thing they needed was to feel worse about their choices, and the last thing I needed was for them to view my success as an opportunity to solve their problems. My academic counselor, Dr. Martinez, noticed the change in my confidence and demeanor. During our monthly check-in meeting, she commented on my professional growth and asked about my career plans after graduation. When I told her about the marketing contract and my expanding role at Morrison Marketing Solutions, her face lit up with genuine excitement. You have accomplished in 1 year what most students do not achieve until several years after graduation, she said. Have you considered graduate school? With your academic record and professional experience, you would be an excellent candidate for some very prestigious MBA programs. The idea of graduate school had always seemed like an impossible luxury, something for students whose families could afford to support extended education. But now, with my own income and a growing professional reputation, it was becoming a realistic possibility. I began researching programs, studying for the GMAT, and planning for a future that extended far beyond what I had originally dared to imagine. Meanwhile, my family was struggling with problems they had created for themselves. During our monthly phone calls, my mother would update me on Amanda's situation. Still unemployed, still living at home, still receiving therapy for the depression that had followed her divorce. My parents had taken out a second mortgage to pay for the wedding, and now they were struggling to make payments while supporting an adult daughter who seemed incapable of taking care of herself. They began asking subtle questions about when I might be ready to come home and help the family through this difficult time. The implication was clear. They expected me to set aside my education and career to rescue them from the consequences of their choices, just as they had expected me to sacrifice my college fund for Amanda's wedding. But I was no longer the naive 18-year-old who had watched helplessly as her dreams were stolen. I was a successful professional with my own income, my own goals, and my own future to protect. The skills I had developed, the confidence I had gained, and the independence I had fought for were not negotiable. 6 months after Amanda's divorce, I received a call that would test every boundary I had established with my family. The call came on a Thursday evening in late September, just as I was finishing a client presentation that would secure another major account for Morrison Marketing Solutions. I was in my new apartment, a modest but comfortable one-bedroom place I had rented with my marketing income, when my phone rang with my mother's contact information flashing across the screen. Her voice was frantic from the first word, barely coherent through tears and hyperventilation. "Victoria," she gasped, "you have to come home right now. Amanda is in the hospital. She tried to hurt herself. The doctors say she had a complete breakdown, and we do not know what to do." My sister had been struggling with depression since her divorce, but none of us had realized how serious her mental state had become. Living at home with our parents, unemployed and humiliated, she had been spiraling into despair, while everyone around her tried to pretend things would eventually return to normal. The attempted suicide had been a desperate cry for help from someone who saw no other way out of the situation she found herself in. I drove home immediately, arriving at the hospital to find my parents in the waiting room, looking older and more defeated than I had ever seen them. Robert sat hunched in a plastic chair, his head in his hands, while Jennifer paced back and forth, wringing her hands and muttering prayers under her breath. When they saw me, relief flooded their faces as if my presence alone could somehow fix everything that had gone wrong. The next few days were a blur of meetings with psychiatrists, social workers, and crisis counselors who explained the long road to recovery that lay ahead for Amanda. She would need intensive therapy, possibly medication, definitely a complete restructuring of her life and goals. The estimated cost for her treatment, combined with ongoing living expenses while she was unable to work, would be substantial. But the financial crisis went far beyond Amanda's medical needs. During one of our family meetings in the hospital conference room, Robert finally admitted the full extent of their monetary problems. The second mortgage they had taken out for the wedding was 3 months behind in payments. Their credit cards were maxed out from covering basic living expenses after Amanda moved back home. The bank had already sent foreclosure notices, and they had 30 days to bring their account current or lose the house. "We made mistakes," Robert said, his voice barely audible. "We thought Amanda's marriage would solve everything, would give our family security and status. Instead, we lost everything, including our relationship with you. You are the only one who has managed to build something stable, something successful. We need your help." The irony was overwhelming. The family who had sacrificed my future for Amanda's dream wedding was now asking me to sacrifice my present success to save them from the consequences of that decision. They had taken my grandmother's money specifically intended for my education, and used it to fund a fairy tale that lasted less than a month. Now they expected me to use the success I had built through my own hard work to rescue them from their financial disaster. Jennifer looked at me with desperate hope in her eyes. You have always been so smart with money, so practical and responsible. Your job at that marketing company must pay well by now. Could you help us catch up on the mortgage payments? Just until Amanda gets better, until we figure out how to get back on our feet? I sat in that sterile hospital conference room, looking at the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally, and realized they still saw me primarily as a solution to their problems rather than a person with my own dreams and goals. They had not asked about my education, my career growth, my future plans. They had not congratulated me on my professional success or expressed pride in what I had accomplished despite their lack of support. The conversation continued for over an hour, with my parents outlining their financial situation in painful detail. They owed $18,000 on the mortgage, another $12,000 on credit cards, and faced monthly expenses they could not cover while supporting Amanda through her recovery. They spoke about losing the house our family had lived in for 15 years, about declaring bankruptcy, about the social humiliation of financial failure in a community where they had already endured the embarrassment of Amanda's divorce. As I listened to them describe their desperate circumstances, I found myself thinking about my grandmother, about the lessons she had taught me about money and responsibility, and the importance of education. She had worked double shifts for years to save money for my future, believing that knowledge and skills were the only things that could never be taken away from a person. She had been right in ways she could never have imagined. That evening, alone in my childhood bedroom, I made a decision that would define my relationship with my family for years to come. I would help them, but not in the way they expected, and certainly not by sacrificing my own financial security to enable their continued poor decision-making. I pulled out my laptop and began researching options for families facing foreclosure, mental health resources for people in Amanda's situation, and financial counseling services that could help my parents learn to manage money more effectively. If I was going to invest in my family's future, it would be an investment that actually addressed the root causes of their problems rather than simply postponing the inevitable. The next morning, I asked my parents to meet me in the kitchen where this entire situation had begun almost exactly 1 year ago. But this time, I would be the one controlling the conversation. I sat at the same kitchen table where my parents had announced their decision to steal my college fund, but everything had changed. I was no longer the devastated 18-year-old who had watched her dreams crumble. I was a successful professional with my own income, my own apartment, and my own future secured through hard work and determination. My parents looked at me with desperate hope, clearly expecting me to write a check that would solve their immediate problems and allow them to continue the same patterns of behavior that had created this crisis. Instead, I placed a folder on the table containing information I had researched the night before. I will help our family, I said, watching their faces light up with relief. But I will help in a way that actually addresses our problems instead of just postponing them. I am not going to enable the same poor decision-making that got us into this situation. I opened the folder and spread out the materials I had printed. Financial counseling services that specialized in helping families avoid foreclosure, mental health resources for Amanda that were covered by insurance they had not known they qualified for, job training programs that could help Amanda develop skills and confidence to rebuild her life. I will pay for 6 months of financial counseling for both of you, I continued, watching their expressions shift from relief to confusion. I will cover Amanda's therapy costs that insurance does not pay for. I will help you negotiate a payment plan with the bank to avoid foreclosure. But I will not simply hand you money to continue managing your finances the way you have been managing them. Jennifer looked stunned, clearly having expected a different kind of rescue. But Victoria, she said, we need immediate help with the mortgage payments. The bank is not going to wait for us to complete financial counseling. That is exactly why I am requiring the counseling first, I replied. You took my college fund because you did not understand the long-term consequences of your decisions. You took out a second mortgage for a wedding because you thought it would lead to social advancement that never materialized. You are facing foreclosure because you have never learned to live within your means or plan for unexpected expenses. Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair, and I could see him struggling with the role reversal of receiving lectures from his daughter. But there was something else in his expression that had not been there before. Respect. Grudging respect for the person I had become, for the strength I had developed through surviving their abandonment. I pulled out another set of documents, these ones showing my own financial position. Bank statements demonstrating the money I had earned through my marketing work. Academic transcripts showing my continued excellence in school despite their lack of support. A letter from Sarah offering me a full-time position after graduation with a starting salary that was higher than either of my parents had ever earned. This is what I have built while you were dealing with the consequences of your choices, I said. I have a successful career, excellent grades, and a bright future that I created through my own efforts. I learned to budget, to save, to make responsible decisions with money because I had to. Those skills are what enabled me to succeed, and those skills are what our family needs to learn. Amanda had been released from the hospital the day before and was sitting quietly at the table, looking fragile but more alert than I had seen her in months. She had listened to our entire conversation without speaking, but now she looked directly at me with an expression I had never seen from her before, genuine remorse. "I am so sorry, Victoria," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I knew what they were doing to you was wrong, but I convinced myself it was okay because I thought my marriage would help everyone. I was selfish and entitled and completely blind to what you were sacrificing for my stupid fantasy wedding." It was the first time Amanda had ever acknowledged the impact of their decisions on my life, the first time she had taken responsibility for her role in what had happened. I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of anger I had been carrying for over a year. The financial counseling sessions began the following week, with my parents meeting with a professional who helped them understand budgeting, debt management, and long-term financial planning. I attended several sessions with them, sharing what I had learned about money management during my months of surviving on my own. Slowly, they began to develop skills they had never needed when their primary financial strategy was hoping that Amanda's marriage would solve everything. Amanda started therapy twice a week, working through the depression and anxiety that had led to her breakdown. More importantly, she enrolled in a community college program to become a certified medical assistant, her first step toward building a career that would give her independence and self-respect. The process was not easy for any of us. My parents struggled with accepting financial advice from their daughter, and there were several heated arguments about my conditions for helping them. But gradually, they began to see improvements in their situation that went beyond just paying bills. They developed a budget they could actually follow, negotiated manageable payment plans with their creditors, and started planning for a future that did not depend on unrealistic expectations or other people's money. 6 months later, our family dynamic had transformed completely. My parents had successfully avoided foreclosure by working with their bank to modify their mortgage terms. Amanda had found a part-time job at a medical clinic while finishing her certification program, and she was dating a kind nurse named Brandon, who valued her intelligence and sense of humor rather than her social connections. Most importantly, everyone had learned skills that would prevent them from repeating the same mistakes. My own success continued to grow. Sarah had made me a full partner in Morrison Marketing Solutions, recognizing that my innovative strategies and client relationships were driving the agency's expansion into regional and national accounts. I had been accepted to a prestigious MBA program with a full scholarship, and several major corporations had already expressed interest in recruiting me after graduation. The day of my college graduation, my entire family sat in the audience as I walked across the stage to receive my diploma summa cum laude. As I looked out at them from the podium, I saw something I had never seen before in their faces, genuine pride in my accomplishments, untainted by expectations or demands for how my success should benefit them. After the ceremony, Robert approached me with tears in his eyes. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you," he said. "You took the worst thing we could do to you and turned it into something beautiful. You did not just survive what we put you through. You thrived because of it." Jennifer handed me a small wrapped gift, and inside I found my grandmother's wedding ring, the one she had specifically asked to be given to me when I graduated from college. Along with it was a note in my mother's handwriting. "For our brilliant daughter who taught us that true family love means supporting each other's growth, not sacrificing one person's future for another's immediate happiness. Standing there in my graduation gown, surrounded by family members who had learned to love me for who I was rather than what I could do for them, I realized that the greatest gift my parents had inadvertently given me was the opportunity to discover my own strength. Their betrayal had forced me to become independent, self-reliant, and determined in ways that being supported and protected never could have taught me. The money they stole had been replaced many times over by the income I now earned. The trust they broke had been rebuilt through their willingness to change and grow. The future they had tried to sacrifice had become better than anything I could have imagined when I was 18 and dependent on their support. 2 years later, Amanda married Brandon in a simple ceremony at our local church, paid for with money she had saved from her job at the medical clinic. The wedding was beautiful not because of expensive decorations or designer dresses, but because it represented two people who genuinely loved each other and understood the value of building a life together through shared effort and mutual respect. As I watched my sister dance with her husband, I thought about the lessons our family had learned through our journey from betrayal to redemption. True success cannot be borrowed or stolen or built on someone else's sacrifice. It must be earned through honest effort, sustained through wise decisions, and shared with people who deserve our love and trust. My parents never asked me to sacrifice my dreams again, because they had learned that supporting someone's education and career was a much better investment than trying to buy social status through expensive weddings. Amanda never expected others to fund her happiness, because she had learned that authentic joy comes from personal accomplishment rather than external validation. And I learned that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who inadvertently push us to become stronger than we ever thought possible. The college fund they took was money, but the education I gained through surviving their betrayal was priceless. Have you ever had to choose between helping family members who hurt you and protecting your own future? How did you find the balance between forgiveness and setting boundaries? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up to help others find it. Do not forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building the life you deserve. And please share this with anyone who might need to hear that they can survive and thrive even when the people closest to them let them down. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it inspires you to never give up on your dreams, no matter who tries to take them away. Remember, your education, your growth, and your future are investments that no one can steal once you have earned them through your own determination and hard work.